Okay, good morning, great ones joining us from every part of Nigeria. I believe it's a wonderful morning over there. And how is the weather at your end? Yeah, we are glad to have you in the fourth masterclass session of the SDGs Advocate Programme. And once again, I want to congratulate each and everyone for making it up to this phase. This morning, without taking much of our time, we'll be moving on to the next session, which is going to be on advancing sustainable development through governance and partnership. And leading that session is an expert in person of the Senior Technical Advisor, Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs, in person of Dr. Balai Yunusu. And we are having a representative of him this morning who will be handling this session in person of Mr. Abubakar. Good morning, Mr. Abubakar. It's good to have you on this call this morning, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emmanuel. Good morning. I believe you can all see me. Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning to you all. I think for better communication, I think I would turn off my video so that I'll be able to stream faster, because the bandwidth is usually slow when your video is on.
Absolutely.
So for the purpose of this introduction, I'll leave the video on. Then afterwards, I can turn it off and then go ahead with the presentation.
All right, that's fine. Thank you very much. And like I mentioned earlier, Mr. Abubakar will be leading us on the topic, advancing sustainable development through governance and partnership. And please, should you have your question, kindly use the comment section on the YouTube to drop your questions or your comments or your concerns, and why he starts the session. Over to you, Mr. Abubakar.
Okay, thank you so much, Emmanuel, and thank you, friends, colleagues, young SDG advocates around the country. I'm happy that you are joining us on this important SDSN youth platform to really show awareness on how to integrate, mainstream, and then accelerate the sustainable development agenda. And as you can see from the screen, on Emmanuel's profile, it's a decade of action. So we're already in the decade of action. We have about less than 8 years to 2030 to achieve the SDGs. So we really need to double our effort and then see how we can also help Nigeria and the rest of the world achieve the target of the Sustainable Development Goals come 2030. So I think I'll be, if you permit me, I'll share my screen, Emmanuel.
Yes, absolutely. You can share your screen.
Okay, good. So just hang on a second. Good. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Okay, yeah, we have the screen, but can you make the slide in full presentation?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you so much, Emmanuel, for the introduction. As Emmanuel have rightly mentioned, I'm a programs analyst at the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President here in Abuja, and I'm standing in for my my colleague and supervisor, Dr. Bala Yunusa, who expressed his apologies for not being able to attend this meeting because he's already on his way for a national assignment. So, and he asked me to stand in here for him. So the topic of this presentation is advancing sustainable development through governance and partnership. So what this means is that in sum, the SDGs cannot be achieved by government alone or by the private sector or student body or civil society organization or the United Nations or any other. It is what we need: partnership and good governance to achieve the sustainable development goal. So this is just what this presentation is all about, to see how we can leverage on what effective governance and partnership to achieve the sustainable development goals. So as a prelude to the presentation, I'm going to give a quick background on what this SDGs is all about. So this the concept of sustainable development, I don't know if you can you see my full screen?
Absolutely, we can see.
Okay, good. Okay, so the concept of the Sustainable Development Goals, dates back to around 1987, during, otherwise known as the Brundtland Report, where they defined the concept of sustainable development as what? As the development that meets the needs of the present generation without the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. So in essence, what does this mean? So if you want to achieve a developmental space or need or target, so you can do that in such a way that you do not compromise what the future generation will also benefit from that development as a result of that development. So that is just what this broad concept of sustainable development, that is why it is called sustainable development. It has to be sustained in such a way that it does not compromise the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs, especially the younger generation. We can all see and feel the impact of climate change. This is something that has been affecting us long before now, but it is now that we are beginning to feel the impact. So it is all. This was adopted since around 1987. It's not something that was adopted in 2000 or 2015 or 2020. So it dates back to 1987 during the Brundtland Report. So which they refer to it as our common future. How do we protect our common future so that everybody can live a life of dignity? So that is just the concept of the sustainable development. So the 2030 agenda for sustainable development derives its intent from this conceptualization of this Brundtland Report in 1987. And it was expressed through the framing of the Sustainable Development Goals. So the SDGs was framed, was conceptualized out of this Brundtland Report in 1987, and that's when the UN and then the other all leaders came together to adopt these Sustainable Development Goals. So as a background, in 2015, all leaders, including our own President Muhammadu Buhari, at the margins of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, adopted 17 SDGs, so which is called the Global Goals. So these goals are a universal call to action to end extreme poverty in all its forms, safeguard our planet, ensure that all people enjoy prosperity and peace by the year 2030. And it is what broken down into 3 dimensions. We have the social dimension, we have the environmental dimension, and then we have the economic dimension of the SDGs. So these goals are what are broken down into 17 different goals, 169 target, and then 230, in some cases 232 key performance indicators, whereby you can use each of these targets and indicators to track progress on the relevant 17 goals. And then is broken down into 3 different dimensions. The environmental dimension, we have the goals that are specifically addressing the environmental dimension. We have goals that are speaking directly to the social dimension, and we have goals that are speaking directly to the economic dimension of the Sustainable Development Goals. So in such a way that by 2030, each and every one of us is ensured to live a life of dignity, to end poverty in all its forms, and then so that we leave no one behind. So at the heart of the SDGs is what? Leave no one behind. I want all maybe colleagues and listeners to take this word down, leave no one behind. Because prior to the SDGs, maybe I'm sure most of us are familiar with the Millennium Development Goals, which ended in 2015. That was when the SDGs was adopted. So when this MDGs the SDGs, sorry, is not something that is new. It's just like a continuation of where the MDGs ended. But however, this SDGs is broader in context. It is more ambitious. It is more interconnected, and then it is more related. Because, for example, what I mean by interconnected and interrelated is that making progress on one particular SDGs means what? We are making progress on another indicator or target of another SDG. For example, we are trying to end poverty in all its forms in Nigeria. So how do we intend to, how can we end poverty in maybe in some forms or in all its forms? So that is one of the goals, So that is goal 1, no poverty. Goal 2, zero hunger. So if you are making investment or impact in goal 2, meaning automatically and by implication, you are also making impact to address the issues of poverty, nutrition, good health. Children will have good nutrition to feed, families to have good nutrition to feed themselves. Women will have money in their pockets. So that is what it means by the interconnectedness and then the indivisibility nature of what the SDGs. And then while we embrace new areas such as economic inequality, innovation, sustainable consumption and production, climate change, and peace and justice. So this SDGs is broader in context, unlike the Millennium Development Goal, which had only 8 goals, 16 targets, and then 32 key performance indicators. So in the case of the SDG, it has 17 goals, which is broader, 169 target, and then 230 or 32 key performance indicators to be able to track these SDGs. So this is just a quick background of the Sustainable Development Goals. Then the scope of the SDGs is that, I've already mentioned that the SDGs must be integrated, they are interconnected, and then what? How do we intend to achieve the SDGs? So they must be integrated into our what? National sustainability and development policies and plans. An approach from what? Top-down and bottom-up. It's not only a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach, no. It must be integrated into our national policies and plans in a sustainable manner. Because I've already mentioned earlier that we need the concept of sustainable development is what the ability of the present generation to what meet their needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. That is where this word sustainability comes in. So it is a whole of society approach. We use the top-down approach and then the bottom-up approach. So to achieve the SDGs. And then one key thing that we need to do to achieve the SDGs is what? Through good governance. Because I've already mentioned, talked about the 3 dimensions, the economic, social, and then environmental. But without good governance, we will not be able to achieve it. What does this mean by good governance? We need to have leaders that are accountable, leaders that respect the rule of law. Even us too, as individuals or citizens, we must be held accountable for our actions towards achieving this the sustainable development through responsible consumption. And for example, we can see what we are facing with the impact of climate change. So we need good governance. So in my own perspective, I put it as the 4th dimension of the SDGs, after the economic, the social, and then the environmental. But without good governance, we'll not be able to achieve these 3 key critical dimensions. And these dimensions are also broken down into what? 5 pillars. We have that addresses the issues of the 5 pillars, otherwise known as the 5 P's of the SDGs. That is peace, partnership, planet, people, and then prosperity. So these SDGs are broken down into 5 different pillars. So with good governance, we need to foster an environment for collective action, whereby each and every one of us is held accountable for his or her action, and then ensuring that actors involved are held accountable and dealing with emerging complex trade-offs between these goals. I've already talked about this. And then achieving the SDGs also takes a strong political will and then political institutions from our political class and processes. And this is where good governance comes in. Any development or agenda without good governance is said to be compromised, and it might be difficult to achieve it. So therefore, governance, in contrast to government, relies on a diversity of participating actors, including all the tiers of government, and even we as citizens or as non-state actors, to adhere to the policies of governance to implementation of the sustainable development and any global development or national development agenda. So how does these SDGs operationalize? So the operationalization of the SDGs is that I have already talked about, is that it is what we need a whole of society approach to achieve these SDGs. National governments are expected to use the SDGs to inform their political agendas and policies. And with 17 different goals to choose from, we have different governments whereby they can identify themselves with these targets for sustainable development that best suit them. For example, governments are to identify those SDGs that are most relevant to them, whereby in such a way, if they want to, the government wants to have their own national plans and policies, the government should prioritize based on those goals that are peculiar to that particular zone, leveraging on the comparative advantage of each of the national government or subnational government, as the case may be. For example, if goal 1, goal 2, goal 3 is more applicable to us here in Nigeria or in Nigeria, so it does not really mean that those particular goals are also applicable or is a priority to maybe countries like that are in Mali. Or let me even bring it down to our local context. If, for example, the government of Lagos State is prioritizing goal 6, which is clean water and sanitation, goal 9, industry innovation, and then goal 12, responsible consumption, and then 13. So that does not mean that a state like Borno State will also must use that those goals that Lagos is adopting. No, they have to use the goals that are peculiar to them in their own local context. So that is what this the operationalization of the SDGs is. So national and subnational government are expected to use the SDGs to inform their political agendas and policies. And with these different 17 goals, the government can choose based on their own comparative advantage. Now, to realize the Sustainable Development Agenda and other internationally agreed development agenda, the United Nations established SEPA, which is known as the Committee of Experts in Public Administration, to understand the different capacities of government and to build effective, accountable, and inclusions at all levels through partnership and collaboration. Because I will mention again that the SDGs, to achieve the SDGs, we need a whole of society approach. The government alone cannot do it. The private sector cannot do it. The academia, the traditional institutions, the civil society, the think tank groups cannot do it. So it's what involves a whole of society. And that is why the UN established what the CEPA, that is the Committee of Experts in Public Administration, to really help countries identify and understand how governments can build and achieve the SDGs through collaboration and partnership. Because the theme of this dialogue is talking about what? Promoting sustainable development through what? Good governance and partnerships. And these principles include competence, sound policy making, collaboration, integrity, transparency, independent oversight, leave no one behind, non-discrimination, participation, solidarity, and intergenerational equity. So I think I would just need to break it down and explain this maybe a bit so that our listeners can understand. So what do we mean by competence? So what this means is that to perform their functions, government should be able to perform their functions effectively. And then institutions are to have sufficient expertise, resources, and tools that will deal adequately with the mandates of their own authority. For example, how can we promote a professional public sector workforce to ensure that people are competent in whatever they are given? How can we ensure that the human resources, strategic human resources, is complied? Using not based on nepotism or I know you, I know that. We need competent people that will be able to deliver based on performance management or through result-based management, or people that are efficient and effective in terms of what? Fair revenue mobilization, equity investment, and then strategic planning, or leaders that have foresight, leaders that are competent. That is what this competence is talking about. Then the issue of sound policy. How do we use a policy as a principles of CEPA so that we use it to achieve the intended results? Because we need what? Sound policy making to achieve intended results, so that the policies are coherent with one another, and then it is founded on a true or well-established grounds in a full accordance with what? The reasons for good of sense. For example, we need regulatory impact analysis. How do we promote coherent policy making through strengthening of our national statistical system? How can we use the data we get, maybe, for example, from MPS, to really inform the policies that are making? So we need to make sound and sound policy making, sound policies that are in line with our own national policies and priorities. We also need collaboration. How can we collaborate? We need to collaborate to address problems of common interest. For example, we are Center of Government Coordination. We need to collaborate to identify our risk management measures. For example, let me give a very good example that was peculiar to every one of us during the COVID-19 era. We know nobody thought COVID-19 would come, but it was through collaboration and then through sound policy making, and the government took some stringent measures to really address the issues to mitigate the spread and then the impact of COVID-19. So it was a collaborative approach between the international community, the national government, that's the federal government, and then the subnational, that is the state, the local government. Even at our own community level, we had to collaborate to reduce the spread of the virus. So we need also to be integrity. We need to be held accountable for whatever we are doing to serve in the public interest. For example, our civil service in the political atmosphere, we must be able to discharge our duties honestly, fairly, and in a manner that is consistent with soundness and moral principle. So in most cases, we'll be talking about maybe the government is doing this. We're talking about corruption, rule of law, but no. Deeply, we need to provide that integrity so that we can be able to elect leaders that we can be able to hold accountable for the actions that they are doing. Even we as individuals, we need to be held accountable for our actions. So we have to be the other principle is transparency. How can we ensure transparency as a principle to achieve the SDGs? We need transparency to ensure accountability and then to enable public sector scrutiny. For example, we have to promote open budgets so that whatever the government is doing during our annual budget, the citizens also should be able to participate and make their own contribution. And the citizens should also be able to challenge the government if these things is not being transparent. They need to know what the government is budgeting for them. So that is what this transparency is talking about. Then we need to have independent oversight. What do we mean by independent oversight? we must trust our government. And then we must all have oversight agencies. For example, the National Assembly have oversight function to respect the projects and programs the government are implementing, because it will promote independence of regulatory agencies. It will also arrange for reviews of administrative decisions by courts and other independent international bodies, independent and audit bodies. So I've already talked about this, leaving no one behind. This is where the inclusiveness of the SDGs comes in. We will have to ensure that the SDGs is what will leave no one behind. That is the LNOB, which is one of the key things of the SDGs, to ensure that each and every human being can fulfill their own potential to live a life of dignity, equality, and then in terms of the public policies that the government are implementing, to address the issues of vulnerability, those that are marginalized members of the society, the vulnerable groups. So with what has to be inclusive, that is what leave no one behind. It's not saying that leave not Nigeria behind, but leave no one behind. Every individual must have a life of dignity to achieve the SDGs. And then the other principle number 9 is talking about non-discrimination, which is also similar to the leave no one behind, to respect and promote human rights and fundamental freedoms of all at all levels. And then we've talked about participation, to have effective, so that everybody can participate at all levels, in maybe through political groups significantly, or especially on matters that really borders our own, collective effort, and then our local communities. Then we need also solidarity to achieve the SDGs. How do we need solidarity? To promote government that is responsive to the needs and aspirations of all people, which is the key central of this pillar. And then the last one is intergenerational equity. What does this mean? Is to promote prosperity and quality of life for all. For example, we need multi-level governance. How can we achieve multi-level governance, maybe between the national government? How does the national government implement their own governance and partnership? How does the state government, what is peculiar in this context in the national government and is not applicable to the subnational government? How can sustainable development impact assessment be able to identify and really address the issues of the sustainable development? How can we identify long-term goals or short-term goals or immediate goals to address the issues of leaving no one behind to achieve the SDGs? And then how can we bring together an ecosystem of professionals, of young professionals, advocates of SDGs, government, the traditional? How can we bring everybody together to achieve the sustainable development? So in summary, this is what all about this the Committee of Experts on Public Administration is trying to address to achieve the SDGs. And then the principles through partnerships opened a door to a massive expansion of governance growing at the global stage, which I've already mentioned it, in such a way that involving both state and non-state actors, and everyone is expected to play a significant role towards achieving the sustainable development goals by 2030. Then the principles of SEPA also indicates that the SDGs provide a shared vision of how these goals are to be achieved. It's clearly stated that in the principles, how are these goals going to be achieved? So goal 17, which is the last goal of the sustainable development, and talks about partnership. So goal 17 talks about partnership in a statement that it is partnership is a statement of what means rather than an end. What does it mean is that it is calling on everybody and the world to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development goal. So it is a statement of means rather than an end. So, and specifically what this goal 17 is saying, that 17.6 state that it is to enhance the global partnership for sustainable development goal. We're talking about good governance and partnership. Without good governance, we'll not be able to have partnership. And without partnership, there will be no good governance. So that is why partnership and good governance come hand in hand. So it is to enhance the global partnership for sustainable development. We need partnership, complemented by multi-stakeholder partnerships or approach that will mobilize and share knowledge sharing, to share expertise, transfer of technology and financial resources to support the achievement of the SDGs in all countries. For example, in terms of technology transfer or expertise, we don't have this the capacity to deploy, to design or provide technology, but we can also what copy it, because the technology is already there in other countries. So the SDGs allow us to what to bring, to leverage on that expertise, to transfer that knowledge of technology into our own local context in such a way that everyone will benefit from it. So we need to support the achievement of SDGs in all countries, and in particular developing countries, Nigeria inclusive. And then target 17.17 encourages and promote effective public-private partnership and civil society partnership. I've already talked about whole of society, so that we can build on the experiences and resources strategies of these partnerships. So now I have already talked about the brief background, and then the operationalization, the scope, the concept of the SDGs. So how is Nigeria implementing the SDGs based on on my previous slides? So in September 2015, after the adoption of the SDGs by President Muhammadu Buhari in New York in September, so President Muhammadu Buhari now gave a mandate to establish the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs, otherwise known as the OSAP SDGs, with fourfold mandate. Mandate one is to provide strategic planning and direction and coordination to all ministries, departments, and agencies in Nigeria. It is the only agency or office that has the sole responsibility to report directly on what SDGs implementation in Nigeria, and it is also to serve as a guide or as a link to other ministries, departments, and agencies through a policy advice and giving guidance and direction into their own ministerial sectoral policies and plans in line with the national development agenda. The second mandate of the OSAP SDG is to representation, advocacy, and then partnership development. What we are doing now is advocacy and partnership. We've been working hand in hand severally with colleagues from the Sustainable Development Solution Network, FEMI, Professor Popola, and the likes, on how we can strengthen partnership and then accelerate the implementation of specific SDGs that we have comparative advantage. And then the third mandate is resource mobilization and management. How can we mobilize resources through the private sector, the national public sector, public-private partnership, international, domestic, international, public, domestic, private, and then domestic, public. How can we mobilize resources to achieve the sustainable development goal? And then the fourth mandate is toward monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and then documentation. How can we report on the achievement of SDGs across all the ministries, departments, and agencies? We need to monitor it, we need to evaluate it, and then whatever we monitor and evaluate, we have to document it and then present it in form of report so that it can serve as a policy document to inform the government on what is going wrong, or where are we making progress, we need to improve. Why are we not making progress? We need to even if it means coming back to the drawing table, how can we come back to the drawing table and address the issues that are not on track towards the achievement of the SDGs? So this is just the full mandate of the OSAP, Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs, headed by Her Excellency Princess Adejoke Orolope Adefurule. So after the President Muhammadu Buhari established the SDGs in 2016, so in response to the President's commitment to the 2030 agenda, Nigeria quickly developed a transition strategy, like I have mentioned, because it's like a succession plan of the sustainable development. But in this case, it is a broader, it is more ambitious, and it is more complex, because it has to address issues of more complex problems that are peculiar to us. So the country transition strategy faced the SDGs implementation in Nigeria. Want to build on the existing foundation, learning from the lessons of MDGs. So what are the existing foundations? So that is the between 2016 and then 2020. How can we build on those foundations that we have learned, the baseline reports that we have learned, and then the MDGs exit report. And then from 2021 to 2025, where we are now, it was how can we scale up the SDGs implementation? And then from 2026 to 2030, how can we now accelerate? Because I've already talked about mainstreaming, acceleration, and then policy support towards achieving the SDGs. So now how can we accelerate the implementation of the SDGs? Because building on the existing bullet point 1 and number talks about how we have mainstreamed the SDGs. Now, number 3 is talking about how can we now accelerate it, otherwise known as the MAPS, mainstreaming, acceleration, and then policy support, to arrive at a place where that no one or no Nigerian is left behind. So this is the strategy that the country has adopted to achieve the SDGs between now and 2030. So this is the SDGs implementation plan, like I have talked about, between 2020 to 2030. We're already in the phase of the implementation, and then from 2016, even though as it is now, we're in the decade of action, we also need to double our effort to accelerate. It will not wait until 2026 before we will now start thinking of accelerating the sustainable development goals into our plans and actions. And then the structure of the implementation plan is we have 6 different chapters. Chapter 1 talks about the background, and then in the introduction, Chapter 2 talks about the overview of the sustainable development implementation in Nigeria. Chapter 3 talks about Nigeria's strategic approach to the implementation of the SDGs. Then Chapter 4 talks about the macroeconomic framework and costing of the SDGs. And then 5 talks about the roadmap for the SDGs implementation. And then Chapter 6 talks about the summary and then the conclusion. So Chapter 1 gives a brief background from how we arrived from the millennium, our journey right from the Millennium Development Goals to the adoption of the SDGs, the concept of the SDGs which I've already talked about, from the Broadland Commission to how we adopted, and then the setting up of the office, and then how the SDGs was adopted, and then how is Nigeria operationalizing the SDGs. That is just the background and introduction in Chapter 1. You'll find the document there is available to the public. You can just Google it, or you can search for it. If I can even share maybe a soft copy through Femi, and he will be happy to share it with everyone that is listening. Then Chapter 2 talks about the overview of the implementation, how the country developed, Nigeria developed the country transition, how through the SDGs data mapping that we did to serve as a baseline for us to really inform us what were the challenges, or where we need to start from the SDG. We need to have like a baseline indicators, and that was the first thing that the office did, to develop a baseline report for the SDGs. And then the second thing is to integrate the economic, social, that's the 3 dimensions of this into what Nigeria's economic recovery and growth plan. Remember that in 2016, Nigeria went into a recession. So how did Nigeria come out of that recession? They need to integrate in all the policies according to the 3 dimensions of the SDGs. So, and that was what really helped Nigeria to come out of recession quickly. And then in that plan, priority was given to sectors that are really, really critical to us. Then Nigeria also domesticated the Nigeria Integrated Sustainable Development Model, which is a policy model that is used to cost the Nigeria Development Plan. And in the same case, we have that same structure now. We are supporting 12 states to use that same model to really cost their own long-term development plan. States like Osun, Ekiti, Gombe, Kwara, they have already launched their own development plan using this ISDG model. So it is a simulation model that is used by experts to cost the development plan, and that is what was used to cost the National Development Plan and include Nigeria Agenda 2050. So we also realign our national statistical system to report on each and every indicator of the SDGs. I've talked about our partnership with the National Bureau of Statistics. How can we build our own partnership to really inform? So what we did was that the office now realigned the national statistical system to ensure that all the 231 indicators of the SDGs will be able to be reported through the national statistical system, which is managed and coordinated by the National Bureau of Statistics, because they are the agency that is responsible reporting national statistical system in Nigeria. So we're in partnership with UNDP, UNICEF, and then the European Union, Nigeria commenced the design of the Integrated National Financing Framework. If you could recall, I mentioned that in the third mandate of the OSAP is toward resource mobilization and finance. So how can we mobilize resources? So we need to design an Integrated National Financing Framework or Integrated National Financing Strategy to see how we can mobilize resources from both the international and then domestic. In the international, through the private international and then the public international, through domestic private and then through domestic public. So we need to mobilize. So Nigeria, in partnership with UNDP, and I'm happy to say that Nigeria is the first country in the world to really launch this Integrated National Financing Framework. It was launched last year in New York, in New York during the sidelines of the General Assembly by the President in New York and the Minister of Finance and then the UNDP Secretary General. And now about 6 or 7 countries are requesting from Nigeria to support them in also developing their own financial strategy, because this financial strategy will be able to map out all the pockets of resources towards achieving the SDGs from both private and then the public sectors. And then Nigeria also commenced the process of the independent evaluation of priority SDGs. I've already talked about the SDGs, what we need to prioritize. It is based on our own content. So in partnership with UNICEF, Nigeria is also the first country after Finland that is in the global south to do an independent evaluation of SDGs 1, SDG 3, and 4. SDG 3 and 4 reports were launched in August last year by the Vice President. We also have the reports and I'm also happy to share this. So these are some of the steps that Nigeria is really taking in terms of what ensuring good governance and partnership to achieve the SDGs. Then we also support federal MDAs on mainstreaming, acceleration, and policies, and then 36 state and FCT on SDGs-based planning. I've already mentioned that we're currently supporting 12 states on their own SDGs-based development planning, and I'm happy to say that at least about 6 states have now launched their own multi-year, some 10 years, others 10, 15, 25 years, as the case may be, to have a long-term sustainable development planning for their state based on their own local context. Then the chapter 3 talks about Nigeria's strategic approach at the national level. So what we have in the national level is integrating the SDGs into what national development planning, integrating the SDGs into what sectoral planning at the ministries, department, and agency level. And then I've talked about this realignment of the national statistical system in line with the requirement of the SDGs. And then we also engage with the National Assembly and then engagement with what other non-state actors, for example, the United Nations Development System, the Development Partners Forum. We also have the private sector advisory group on SDGs, and then we have the civil society coalition strategy group on SDGs. So these are all stakeholders that are coming on board. We also have our SDGs ambassadors or champions or advocates, as the case may be, because the SDGs I've already mentioned, it is what a whole of society approach. We need both state actors and non-state actors to come together in form of what governance to govern and partnership to what promote good governance to achieve the SDGs. So the same structure that we have at the national level or at the federal level, we also have the same structure at the subnational level. So we also we have in the states, we have, just like we have the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs at the national level. So even in the states, we have the Office of the Governors, or Office of the Special Advisors to the Governors, Office of the Special Assistant to the Governors. It depends. Each state has the liberty or their own. They have the right to use the nomenclature to have their own structure at the subnational level. So this is what Chapter 3 of the document of the implementation plan is talking about. Then Chapter 4 talks about what macroeconomic indicators and then the costing of the framework. I've already talked about the ISDG costing model. So the ISDG is a bit more complex. I know we have this might sound too vague for them, but I just want to give you an idea of how we are able to use this costing model to really identify how much Nigeria is required between now and 2030 or even 2050 to achieve the SDG. We need over investment of what 125 trillion naira to achieve the sustainable development between 2020 and then 2030. So that is a big amount of resources. So it was the ISDG model that was used to really cost the development plan based on the need assessment that was carried out by the Ministry of Budget and National Planning. So this then Chapter 5 talks about what the costing. So this section is based on 2019 SDGs report. We're using 3 scenarios: the no ERGP scenario, the ERGP and SDG scenario, which I've mentioned that we need about 126 trillion naira in nominal terms, which is about 83 trillion naira to achieve the SDGs. For private SDG expenditure, the cumulated SDG related expenditure is about 160 trillion naira. Then, in summary, we use this simulation model, which was developed by the Millennium Institute, to really help countries identify how much is required of them to achieve the sustainable development based on their own national development plan and policies. So the same thing, we're using that same model at the subnational level to help the state actually really determine how much actual, even though it's a budget, but how much is required, do they require to achieve the SDGs, so that they can be able to prioritize their investment, whether investment in health, whether investment in education, in agriculture, in infrastructure, as the case may be. So this is the model that was used to really cost the SDGs for the national government. Let me use the word national government, including the federal and then the state government. Then Chapter 5 talks about our roadmap of implementation, governance, like the governance and institutional framework that was set up, how we understand the SDG maps. I've already talked about mainstreaming. How can we mainstream the SDGs? We're mainstreaming it into our different sectoral policies and plans. We're now in the decade of action. How can we now use this institutional framework set in place at the national and subnational level to accelerate the SDGs? And then what kind of policy support can we give through the support from the federal government, from international experts, the United Nations Development Group, the European Union, and every key stakeholder? How can we use our own policies and initiatives to support the institutional framework that was set up by the government? Then how do we mainstream and support the subnational government as well? How can we engage with stakeholders, and then how do we mobilize resources? The INF is a very broad document that really mapped out clearly how Nigeria should be able to mobilize resources to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Then financing the SDGs, which is also part of the INFF, that's the Integrated National Financing Framework. Then we have the communications channel or communication framework. We need to communicate, because whatever we're doing without communication and advocacy, nobody will know the kind of work that we're doing. So we need to sensitize the public on the activities of the government towards the implementation of the SDGs. Then I've talked about the monitoring evaluation. We need to monitor it. We need to know, we need to evaluate our progresses. And then we have a program lever, the monitoring, evaluation, and then reporting at the federal government. We have it at the national level. And then we have independent evaluation of priority SDGs. Like I have mentioned, we have done the evaluation of SDG 3 and 4, which was the top priority of the government last year, to really know how, really, how much the government has invested, and what is the impact of the investment in SDG 3 and 4. That is, SDG 3 talks about good health, and then SDG 4 talks about quality education for all. And then we also have a global reporting and the representation through the high-level political forum in New York, whereby every country is expected to be presenting and then reporting on the progress so far made on SDGs. It is an annual event, and it's usually held in November in New York. Then why do we need partnership for the SDGs? The UN system defines what partnership. I've talked about partnership. I don't need to dwell so much on this, but this allows us to bring multi-stakeholder initiatives voluntarily undertaken by governments, intergovernmental organizations, civil society, other groups, and other stakeholders, which efforts are contributing to the implementation of government. And then how do we need to agree on what our own development goals and commitments, because we need this partnership to achieve these goals. For example, I've talked about our partnership with the Sustainable Development, that's the SDSN Nigeria chapter. We're working on what we call the FABLE initiatives, which is an initiative by the global SDSN to see how countries are trying to address the issues of food insecurity and then promote nutrition, whereby addressing the issues of climate change. So that is the kind of partnership we're talking about. So we have this strong partnership with the Sustainable Development Solution Network to see how we can establish this FABLE initiative. And we know that we cannot achieve the SDGs if we continue the business as usual model. So we have to think outside the box. In some cases, I would say that we need to think like there is no box. Because if you think outside the box, you have a boundary. But when you think there is no box, you are going beyond the horizon to think of how you can bring innovative ways or innovative ideas to achieve the SDGs, because we cannot continue doing the business as usual if we really want to think of how we are achieving the SDGs. We need to work together. We have to avoid working in silos. We need to work collectively to address the root causes of our problems. We need to identify our problems right from our own homes down to our communities, to our societies, to our local government, state, and then the national government, and at continental level. So that is the bottom-up approach, and then the top-down approach that we're talking about. And then through this kind of partnership, the Office of the Senior Special Assistant was able to achieve the following, especially in this decade of action. So what we have done so far in this decade of action is that we developed a coherent national SDGs implementation plan. We realigned the national statistical system, which I've already talked about. We use the SDG model to develop the medium-term national development plan, and then the Nigeria Agenda 2050, and how much is expected for Nigeria to implement these goals and targets. And then this will ensure that our resources are invested in such a way that we give priority, whereby in sectors that have greater multiplier effect on achievement of the SDGs. And then we have also worked closely with state and non-state actors to accelerate and then strengthen our advocacy for the SDGs in Nigeria, and even at the 774 local governments in Nigeria. So this is just the modest progress that the office has done. We have achieved. We've developed the country's transition strategy, the SDGs data mapping, and then the baseline report that was developed, the Nigerian Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, the first and second voluntary national reviews. Then we have the sustainable development that was translated in the 3 major languages in Nigeria and distributed to almost all secondary schools across the country. So we have translated the SDGs into Yoruba, into Hausa, into Igbo, and then the other one in English, and has been distributed to, I don't have the actual figure, but I know that it has distributed to all the 36 states and then to almost all secondary and primary schools in the country. We have developed the Nigerian, the ISDG model, which is achieving the SDGs in Nigeria, pathway and policy option. That's the ISDG model I'm talking about. So this is the first and second voluntary local review. We have our own INFF document, the Nigeria Development Finance Assessment Report, the independent evaluation of SDG, and so many other documentation that books that we have done so far. We have so many books. And then, so this, in terms of the partnership that I've talked about, these are some of the key initiatives and then strategies that we have done. So in this first column, under our key strategies, these are the activities. We have the time frame and then responsibility, or what our partnership, the partnership between the office and then the partners that were used to achieve the SDGs. For example, implementation of a coherent national SDGs plan was in line with what? Between the OSAP and then the all ministries, departments, and agencies. Alignment of the national statistical SDGs with the national development plan is also between the Office of the Senior Special and then through the all ministries, departments, and agencies in Nigeria. Integrating the SDGs into existing or medium long-term plan. This is specifically between the government headed by the Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning. And then the realignment of the SDGs with MDS. This is headed by the National Bureau of Statistics in collaboration with the Office of the Senior Special Assistant and then all the ministries, departments, and agencies. Then the use of the ISDG model also was between Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning, the SDGs, and then with the technical and financial support of UNDP. Then we also conduct high-level advocacy on SDGs mainstreaming to all the 36 states through with partnership also with UNDP and then the ministries, department, and agencies. Then the preparation of our SDGs guidance notes. This is what the office is doing. Then conducting capacity building to bureaucrats in all the 36 states, which is an annual event and is ongoing. This is true with MBS because they have to be taken on how to report on the SDGs using the SDG data dictionary, using the national statistical system. So this is collaboration between the OSAP SDGs, the NBS, that's the National Bureau of Statistics, UNDP, and then other subnational governments. We also have, the list goes on, the list is counted, but these are some of the key activities or key initiatives that we have done, and whatever we do is documented to ensure what to promote accountability and then good governance, because even if we wake up tomorrow and we have a new set of government, at least the institutional memory is there. So whoever comes in will know that everything that we're doing is what is well documented and is well published, and all the documents are available online. So these are the kind of partnership that we're talking about. We need this partnership and collaboration to achieve the SDGs through what? Good governance. Without good governance, we cannot be able to achieve all these line of activities that I have mentioned. We have partnered with the United Nations system, the EU, the finance ministries. We even the African peer review mechanism. We just conducted a workshop, a continental workshop in Abuja, March last year, whereby we brought about 52 African countries to show them on how to really dwell on the voluntary local reviews. How can we report the progress of SDGs at our own local level? Because we have our own voluntary national reviews. So we're now thinking of how do we need to go a step ahead to, instead of reporting at the national context, how can the subnational, that is the state government, how can they also report on their voluntary local reviews? And I'm happy to say that as we speak currently now, we have Lagos, Kaduna, and then Nasarawa State that were already on board. I think Kaduna State have already prepared, they've already done the analysis, they've done the survey. They are now in the process to finalizing the report, and the report will be launched, I think, sometimes in early March or early or mid-March. So Lagos is also on board. So we are trying to see that we bring all the state actors to also report on their voluntary local reviews for the implementation of this, so that we know that which state is really on track to achieve the SDG and which state is lagging behind. So it is through the voluntary local reviews that we'll be able to really achieve, know that which countries are lagging behind and which countries are moving fast. So in conclusion, I know I've taken so much of the time that I've been allotted to. So we know that we cannot achieve the SDGs if we continue the business as usual method. We need to avoid working in silos, and then we need to collectively work together through partnership, promote accountability and governance to address the root problems or root causes. And the SDGs cannot be achieved with standalone policies and programs. They must be carefully integrated into our national and subnational policies and plans to achieve the SDGs. The COVID-19 pandemic was a stark reminder that we are interconnected, and so our solutions. That is, our future depends on everyone prospering, and indeed that no one is left behind. So with the experience and lessons from COVID-19, through partnership, through collaboration, the world was able to come out from the shocks of the pandemic that brought not only health implications, but even socioeconomic implications to the world. Although significant challenges remain, but to be successful, we must all work together to amplify the sustainable development goals and ensure that we double our collective efforts, especially in this decade of action. And I think on this note, I want to thank you so much for listening, and I'm open to your questions, feedback, and then contributions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abubakar, for this engaging and enlightening session. I believe we've had so many information, even informations that, let me see, you mentioned something that we're not working within a box, and the principles of SDGs safer. Yeah, these are wonderful points which you've made, sir. Right about now, we are going to be attending to some questions which we have from our participants on YouTube. And I'm just going to ask some questions just like they've asked over there. I have a question from Jimai Joanna. I think he asks that as an advocate, considering the gap between the government and citizens, practical ways through which we can introduce these SDGs for the integration into different levels of government. And there's another question from Hadi. He asks that what are the constraints and limitations of SDGs in Nigeria? I would like to maybe you attend to these two questions before we move to another one.
Okay, thank you so much, Emmanuel, and then thank you, Ezeani, for your question. Yes, the question is what is the federal government doing to achieve this goal, because we haven't seen anyone working on that goal in Nigeria. And I think let me make it clear here is that a lot of Nigerians still think like the MDGs, because the MDGs is entirely different from the MDGs. The MDGs was funded through what the debt relief game, that is the debt relief from the Paris Club and then the London Club. But for the SDGs, there's no dedicated funding for it, because there are two different things: funding and financing. Funding is for a project. Financing, that is why we have our integrated national financing framework. How can we finance the SDGs? That's why we're not talking about what funding the SDGs. We're talking about financing the SDGs. But the MDGs was funded. So and now for in Nigeria, this SDGs is what, if you listen to my presentation when I was giving about the overview of how the office was set up based on its fourfold mandate, through what advocacy, reporting, representation, monitoring, evaluation, and then resource mobilization. Those are the fourfold mandates. Now, the SDGs is not an implementing, the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President. I think I'm also trying to address another question that is related to this. So the office is not an implementing agency. It is what a coordinating agency, whereby it's working together in partnership with all the ministries, departments, and agencies to ensure that SDGs is being implemented. For example, the minister, all the goals that are related to what agriculture, food. That is some goals under goal 1, no poverty, goal 2, zero hunger, Ministry of Agriculture. So the SDGs is now working with the Ministry of Agriculture to ensure that all the policies and plans and then programs are really addressing those particular goals. So because unlike the Millennium Development Goals that was so visible everywhere, because during the MDGs, I was also a technical assistant. I was in charge of several local governments in Kaduna State, and every project you see, maybe whether a classroom block, primary healthcare center, water point, boreholes, access to market, was done through the MDGs funding. But we are now talking about what financing the SDGs. That's why I'm trying to say it clear that we have two different issues of what resource mobilization. We have the funding aspect, and then we have the financing aspect. For the MDGs, it was funded through the debt relief of $1 billion annually. But for the SDGs, we are trying to see how we can finance the SDGs by integrating it into our sectoral policies and plans of all the SDGs, of all the MDs, the ministries, department, and agencies. So that's the difference between the MDGs and then the SDGs, because that's what people are talking about. We have not seen this, we have not seen that. No, it is the ministries, department, and agencies that are responsible to really implement the SDGs, because the Office of the Senior Special is not an implementing agency, even though they have some flagship programs like some of their flagship programs through the conditional grant scheme, construction of classrooms, construction of this Mother and Child Care Center, 110 bed that is being commissioned by Her Excellency in almost about 19 states recently. Those are some of the flagship initiatives by the office, but it is the ministries, department, and agencies that are responsible for implementing the SDGs in Nigeria based on the mandate that the office was established. I think I have answered that question. And then the second question is, what have you...
Well, basically, there are some questions I just want you to attend to straight away.
Okay.
And there are some questions they ask which are directed to some ministry. I would advise you seek more information directly from the ministry. You can get information on their website.
Okay. Then the second question is, what are the constraints and limitations of the SDGs from Hadi? Yeah. So I have mentioned in my presentation, one of the key constraints and limitations, what we all know that we're grappling with inadequate resources to really finance the SDGs, because I'm not using the word funding, but I'm using the word financing the SDGs. Now, if you look at from the Integrated National Financing Framework, if anybody has that by chance, you can look at the document. Is a very comprehensive document that has is a horizon document that has mapped out the horizon landscape of all the financial pockets in Nigeria. How can we mobilize resources from private sectors? One of the key things that even interests me in the report is what tax credit, and that is what the federal government is also implementing now, because it was in the document that how can we give tax credit to provide certain facilities to Nigeria. For example, now we have that the likes of the Dangote, MTN, and even NNPC Limited, they are financing some particular projects in Nigeria to do road construction, but they are giving it to the country as a tax credit. So this is one of the initiatives of the government, because we have so many constraints, and one of the major we have so many constraints, but the major constraint that we all know that is inadequate and then financial resources. Even if all the resources is pulled together, both the federal government resources, the internally generated, the revenue generated from the federal government, and then the state government, if we put everything together, it will still be grossly inadequate to finance the SDGs. So that's one of the key constraints to finance the SDGs. So finance, we all know that we're dealing with issues of financing. So, and that's why we're trying to see how we can bring the private sector, because the private sector, they can finance between 40 and 60% of the sustainable development goals in Nigeria, and the goals that are applicable and then are into our local context. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Abubakar. And there is a question which I don't know, maybe you've stylishly answered it, or let me just ask the question again. There is a question from Mansura. What strategies being put in place to allow NGOs work with government bodies on this implementation? Are there benefits NGO gets from the government for the implementation of the project? Then there is another question from Joanna. It said, as an advocate, considering the gap between government and citizen, what are the practical ways through which we can introduce these SDGs for integration in different levels of government?
Okay, I think these are questions that are similar. So I think I'm going to kill two birds with one stone, if you allow me.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. So I've mentioned the kind of partnerships that the office has established, and then the structure that we have. We have the national government structure, we have the state. I think let me go back to the slide so that I will explain it to you very well, and then you can look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I will just want to go back to that structure where we have our own the structure of the, so that everybody, if you look at the Nigeria strategic approach at the national and subnational levels, it's talking about what the structure of the SDGs. You know, the SDGs, like I have mentioned, and I'll keep on saying, it is what a whole of society approach. It is not the responsibility of the president or the vice president or ministers or ministries or even the senior special assistant. No, it is responsibility of what the national and subnational government, both state and non-state actors, the state government, the policy makers, even we as citizens. It is our own collective responsibility to come together in a coherent manner and what ensure that SDGs is being implemented with what efficiency and in an effective manner. How? Through collaboration with different stakeholders. And if you look at under the national level, integration into the SDGs international development planning, into SDG sectoral planning, realignment of the national statistical system with MBS, engaging with what? The National Assembly members. Those are what our political class. We also have a relationship and we paid a courtesy visit and advocacy to the judiciary. So, and then we have engagement with other non-state actors, including the UN Development System, the Development Partners Forum or Development Partners Group, with all the diplomatic partners in the country. And then we have the private sector advisory group that is our link between the government and then the private sector to see how we can bring the SDGs. It is being co-chaired by Mr. Bolaji Balogun. Then we also have our civil society organization strategy group on SDGs. And this is where the NGOs come in, because they are the closest to the people. And then it is said that development is local. And that is why we have a civil society organization strategy group on SDGs, whereby all the CSOs, including NGOs, come together, and if they come together as a body or as a platform to really address the issues of SDGs. And it is being chaired by, I think, is Dr. Uzo, is the chairman of the Civil Society Strategy Group on SDGs. So I think, so this is the framework that the office has established to say that everybody is what is carried along in the designing of policies and plans for the implementation of SDGs in Nigeria. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Abubakar. And I know that you have some document to share with us. Definitely, we are going to receive that alongside with your presentation slide. Yeah. So we appreciate you have the copy of the document. And there is a question which we also want to ask, because we have a lot of, let me say, I won't call them field agents now. We have a lot of young advocates. We have a lot of organization, youth-led organization and youth-focused organization working around various aspects of sustainable development goals and running different projects across the 36 states plus FCT. But I remember you also mentioned that, yeah, and that's more evident, which I have information about. We have connections across the 36 states. We have ministries in some states. We have ministries solely in charge of SDGs, while in some states it's just SSA to the governor on SDGs. How do you think we can build communication and foster easy communication between these youth-led organizations and the key parastatals in each of these states?
Yeah, thank you very much, Femi. I think this is a very interesting question. While you were asking this question, I was just thinking it's also like a challenge to us to see how we can use to leverage on the platform, both on us as government, that's as also as Office of the Senior Special, and then as SDSM, because you have your own link with these young advocates. I think it's something that well, we've not thought of this before, but I think it's something that we can take from now. I think this is one of the key takeaways I will take from this dialogue or this discussion, to see how we can partner between leverage on the platform that we have, since we have direct link to all the 36 states. So how can we now introduce, maybe through the SDSN youth wing in Nigeria, to see how we can introduce, maybe sort of, since we have already established the civil society and then the federal at the national level, how can we also use to link the SDSN in all those states to the state actors, for example, to the ministries in charge of, or the office in charge of SDGs industry. I think this is something that is an initiative that will also help us to really amplify the SDGs, because there is low visibility of the SDGs. I must be frank with you. I must be honest. All like the MDGs, because I could remember back then during the MDGs era, I went to a monitoring exercise in, I think it was in Kogi State, when we were doing the baseline study and then the mapping exercise. So we went to a community and they were telling us that if MDGs would be a political party today, they would vote for MDGs because of what MDGs has done to them. Because in that community, they never had anything. They never had school. Their children were attending school under a tree. So wow. As a result of MDGs intervention, they were able to get 3 classroom blocks. They got a comprehensive healthcare center in that community. They got a solar water point, whereby it was able to serve at least 3,000 households, even within the communities that are within them. So I think these are kind of things that we really need to push to, and then to amplify the message of the SDGs. Even though, like I have mentioned, and I'll mention again, SDGs is not like MDGs. Because for the MDGs, the funding was already available of $1 billion annually between 2000 and then 2015. So, but for this SDGs, we need to strategize to really how we can finance it. And that's why we're bringing every stakeholder involved. Even in our homes, we are financing SDGs. Because the moment we eat, if we have the money to go to the hospital, to eat, to go to schools, at least we're also implementing SDGs, even right from our homes. So I think this is an initiative that I think I'll take it as a takeaway from this, and then see how we can take it off from there, so that we can link other NGOs, at the subnational, to really how they can also amplify the message of the SDGs.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Abubakar, for that wonderful feedback. And I believe, just like the strategy of OSAP is to build, scale, and accelerate towards the 2030 agenda, we are already at the midpoint to Agenda 2030, and we all have to initiate and accelerate all actions. All hands must be on deck towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's not just left to the government alone, not left to the private organization alone. All individuals are included, without leaving no one behind. Without leaving anyone behind. It's very important we all gather efforts to achieve it. Once again, on behalf of the Leadership Council of SGSN Nigeria, we want to appreciate you, sir, for taking your time to facilitate this session. And definitely, I know that Dr. Balatu will have been here this morning, but due to his national engagement,
I think Dr. Bala would have been the perfect.
No.
Yeah.
But you needed us. I remember the session Dr. Bala had last year, and it was also engaging. And the one we had with you this morning, it's super engaging. I really appreciate the time, and our sincere regards to him and the entire management of OSAP. Thank you for the wonderful session you've had with us today, and really appreciate. We look forward, because the SDG Advocate Programme is a concurrent program. Definitely, we are still going to be having 3 more cohorts this year before the end of the year, and the next cohort is going to start in April. So we look forward to receiving you over and over on this key.
Please, anytime.
Thank you very much.
We're in this together.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Dear participants, I believe it's been a wonderful day. Even the weather has been awesome as well. From a different end, I can see someone's comment as regards your matter. You just have to enjoy it. Everything is changing, the climate change and all. So this morning, I would just like to give further information as regards the next phase of the SDG Advocate Programme, which has to do with the Hone School project, which has also the community project. I'm going to say this, I really don't know how we are going to do that. We are missing out in 2 sessions of the Masterclass. That's a session on project management and community development. And there's another session, design thinking, and which is very important. Design thinking there is a knowledge gap when it comes to design and system thinking, which a lot of youths and a lot of individuals and organizations do not know about. So based on whatever the management decide over the weekend, we are going to get back to you, but there is a possibility that we are going to have another masterclass session next week, If we are not going to have it, we are going to share that information with you. And regarding the own school project, you can commence your school project as soon as you have approval, as soon as you have the approval from the school management. Yeah. So for those who were rejected due to one reason or the other, please, you can just check for another school very close to you, please. We've mentioned it, it must not, let's say 3 kilometers, 3 to 5 kilometers from your locale. And another thing is, please work, your presentation to the school is very important. You are not going there. You are not going there to change your curriculum. You are not going there to evaluate their teaching strategies or methodologies. What you are going there is basically solely to introduce the SDGs to the students, and which is meant to be just a 2-time event, if not a 1-time event. If you know that you definitely had a good impact in your first engagement with the student, that's fine. So please, I want us to ensure a good communication with the school management. And regarding the community projects, some templates were shared with us earlier this week on what we can do. We are to identify a specific problem in our community, and which is targeted to a primary goal, primary SDGs, maybe zero hunger, or good, decent work and economic growth, whichever of the goals. And definitely you can still have a secondary goal. And I remember I mentioned it during the information session, which we had that was last weekend with the state reps, that you can have breakout groups in your state, whereby you have, your state is very big and the advocates in your state are far away from each other. Please, you can have what they call it, state sub-teams, whereby, well, definitely you are still working on the same project. You are still working on the same project. And the submission proposal started. The template has been shared with us. Let's check the resource, the advocacy resource link for the templates and also the submission template. I believe I don't have any updates as regards the assessment yet, because we have to decide, the organization have to decide on whatever the 2 masterclass session is going to be and when it's going to hold. That will lead to the further information which we are going to share as regards the assessment. But initially, the assessment is scheduled to hold next week, Wednesday. That's 8 p.m. I think 8 p.m. Yes. So please, these are basic informations to share, and please, let's all stay safe in our various states. This is an electionary period. I know that we all have a candidate which we want to emerge as a president or governor, but it's very important. Your own safety is very important. The new Nigeria we are praying for, you can only benefit from it if you are alive. So please, stay safe. Whatever the cash issue, whatever the fuel issue is, please just ensure, stay safe mentally, stay safe physically, and stay safe emotionally. Don't let Nigeria give you heartbreak or breakfast, have breakfast. So all things are going to be well, and we'll definitely reap the good of this nation. So I don't know if there are other things I've not attended to, but if there are such that I've not attended to, you can communicate with your state rep. The state rep will speak with the communication and programs team, and for that, it's back to us. We wish you a wonderful weekend and a pleasant one indeed. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for the feedback and then for facilitating the whole session. It's really, very thought-provoking, and then thank you so much to the participants for taking their time also to join and then share our own insights on SDGs implementation in Nigeria. And I look forward to more engagement, even in a wider expanded platform. Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, the listeners. Thank you so much for your time, and then for the wonderful feedback. So I've dropped the documents to your email now.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for that swift response. Really appreciate it. All right. Bye, everyone.